I started getting a lot of orphans. When I first got my sheep, I'm like, what's going on? There'd be a dead one here and a dead one there, one over there bawling. You know, every night after work, I'd go running out there and walk through my sheep trying to match them up. Folks, leave them alone. All you're doing is making abandoned lambs out there. Because you got a new mother. She just dropped out a set of twins, maybe. She's sitting there smelling them. Maybe you haven't even licked on them yet. You go walking up there. And they're kind of darty. She'll run off, and you got another 100 lambs out there bawling, man. She doesn't go back. You just killed 2 lambs. Unless you want to bottle feed them. And we weren't set up to do that. The minute I stopped going into the paddock, that's when things really got good. They've got guard dogs and they got grass. Leave them alone. And when you move them into the next paddock, just open the gate. The ones that haven't lambed, they'll go through that gate first. And then the new mothers, they will finally guard their little guys. They'll get them up. And if you get behind them and try and push them through that gate, it's a wreck. Let them move their lambs by themselves. Go back in 24 hours or 12 hours and close the gate because they'll all be in the next paddock. Water source. Is that a water source? It's not a very good picture, but it's crap. A guy was using that to water cattle in. It was an old pond. He had fed hay all the way around it. There was manure in there. The cows were in there. They pooped in it. They peed in it. It smelled like a feedlot. And the water was black. He was making his cows drink that. He had more empty LA200 antibiotic bottles in his shed. He was always doctoring his animals. They were always sick. That's why. Cows are 70 to 75% water, and you're giving them crap for water? Folks, give them good water. That's water. That's good water. You should be able to drink it. And if you wouldn't drink it, probably shouldn't expect your livestock to drink it. And remember this, the lower class you go in the animals, in other words, from a mature cow down to a baby kid goat, they require a lot higher quality of water. Okay? These are something I really got into. We put in tire tanks now. We build a pond, I'll put a pipe in the bottom, and I put a tire tank on the back. That tire tank doesn't cost me anything. The tire's free. We do put these bars over the top to keep a baby calf from falling in there. And also it keeps the cow's noses off my float. There's a float in there on a valve. And the bottom of that is just sackcrete. It's just concrete. And it takes about 5 bags of sackcrete to pour a bottom of one of those. I take a sheetrock knife. Look for tires that don't have steel in the sidewall. You can take a sheetrock knife and just cut the sidewall out of that. That tank will hold 800 gallons. And folks, if a hunter shoots that thing with a deer rifle, you're going to hurt it. It's rubber. If they shoot a metal tank, you're going to be sick. It won't rust, it won't rot, and they're just super, super abuse friendly. That's the new new perimeter fence. We just got this farm. This is 240 acres. And there's 5 wires on that. No, there's 6. I'm sorry. I put pigs in here. So these 2 bottom ones are my pig wires. These are high tensile. Folks, if you're going to put up wire, make sure you use 12 gauge, please. We're talking about a permanent perimeter fence. Don't use 14 gauge. I go on so many farms, they've got everything set up pretty nice, and I look at their fence, I'm like, oh my God, you use 14 gauge wire? Why? No. 12 gauge, 170,000 PSI. 12 gauge, 170,000 PSI. You want a deer to hit that? It may flop the deer back, and he may go on, but he's not going to break it. 14 gauge, it's broke. I promise you, it's broke. Yep.
Line post, what brand?
Line post, I don't use anything on our farm but fiberglass.
Right, but is that a PowerFlex product?
That's my product.
Okay.
Yeah. I sell fiberglass posts. I buy them scrap. We get 24-foot lengths out of a factory, and we chop them up and paint them. Or the ones we use on our farm, we paint. The ones we sell are unpainted. They run about $1 a foot. I don't want steel post out there. Folks, if you're going to set up a farm, promise me this, don't use steel post. Life's too short for that. You're going to be out there every night walking your fence. You got a short, and what's going to happen, a deer's going to hit that wire. He's going to pull the insulator off your steel post. Then the wire comes flying back, and it touches this ground rod. And if you've got multiple paddocks up, and you've got 500 steel posts out there, you've got 500 ground rods. You'll never keep your fence hot, ever. We don't have a problem. We never have a problem with our fence because we use all fiberglass, good wire, good corners, and then this is what we do every day. So this is my poly braid. That's a geared reel. O'Brien makes the best geared reel out there. Again, through Ken Cove, you can get those geared reels. Make sure you don't get the mega reel. Mega. Don't get that one. It's a great big old geared reel. You don't need it. It holds a lot of wire. It's more expensive. You don't need it. Get a standard geared 3-to-1 ratio reel. So every time you turn that handle, it spins 3 times. You can roll up a 1/4 mile of wire in about 15 seconds. That's how quick that comes up. So I've got my post behind my four-wheeler. I'm going across the paddock, and I'm just throwing them out like lawn darts. And I've got an intern back there sticking them in. Now, if I didn't have an intern, I would mount this up here off of my luggage rack on a bar so that all I had to do is grab a post, step off. I wouldn't even have to get off my four-wheeler. In other words, my reel would be spinning the wire out right up here, grab a post, take my foot, stick it in the ground, put the wire on without getting off the four-wheeler. It needs to be quick, folks. You need to be able to do this fast, I believe. There's the Tamworth when we had them bonded on with the hogs. You can see they kind of like that cedar tree. They're down there in the shade. These are some of the grasses that we see coming up. That's eastern gamma grass. That's one we didn't plant. It's just coming up in our pastures. It's a wonderful warm season. There's big blue stem. This is another warm season grass that's coming up. We didn't see this until we switched to mob grazing from just plain old rotational grazing. In other words, we're allowed to give our farms a bigger rest recovery. If we get in a drought, folks, we can go 150 days. You may need to go 150 days. If you're in Arizona, where's that guy that's in Arizona? If you're in Arizona and you get 4 or 5, 6 inches of rainfall a year, you may only be able to graze that particular paddock once a year. Some of those guys in New Mexico every 2 years. It depends on your rainfall, where you're at.
So can you just run through your quick paddock size?
Can I run through a quick paddock size? Okay, in the springtime, we will be given, now, you're talking about 300 cows here, okay? In the springtime, we'll give them like 5 to 7 acres in the morning, 5 to 7 acres at night. That gets us through that first rotation. So we get through all the grazing we want in the spring in the first 30 days. We try and get all the plants that we're going to graze off in 30 days. The next rotation, you've got to watch because now it's getting hotter. The temperature's going up. We haven't had as much rainfall because, folks, there is a thing called spring flush. Spring flush is when the plants just explode. That's the hardest time to manage your grasses. But now we're into, say, the last of June. Now we need to be 45 to 50 days maybe. So now we're going to tighten those cows up into maybe 3-acre paddocks. So that's going to make it a longer time before we get around our farm now. If it hasn't rained, folks, in 30 days, we're talking summer. If it hasn't rained in 30 days, for those of you all just starting out, I would recommend when you get on your second rotation, go out and drive a wood stake. Take a magic marker and put a mark on it where that grazing level is on your plants, an average in your pasture. Mark that level, okay, and date it. Let's just say it's June 30th, okay? I was at 8 inches on June 30th. Now it's July 30th, I'm only at 9 inches. You're in trouble. You've grown 1 inch of forage in 30 days and you haven't destocked. some, you need to immediately implement your drought strategy. You need to get rid of some animals. You need to get rid of some animals. When that plant is not growing back and you just keep your head in the sand and pray for rain, praying, there's nothing wrong with praying. Nothing at all. But it's not a good management strategy. You've got to manage for what you know. You know your plants haven't recovered. Get rid of some animals. Don't try and feed through a drought. You say, well, Greg, I'm just going to go buy some hay and feed hay. You know what happens when you do that? You're losing money. You may end up with more hay in that cow than what she's worth. Because you don't know when the drought's going to end. And the worst part of it is, they're overgrazing your farm in that drought. And so when the rains do come in the fall, guess what? You got a farm that looks like this tabletop. And when it rains, you're not going to grow any winter feed. Zero. Well, maybe an inch. That's not winter feed. So be careful. When it doesn't rain, don't just keep grazing around your farm like, oh, it's all rosy and peaches, so it's all going to be fine. No, it's not. If you haven't anything recover in 30 days, make some decisions. I don't know how I got off on that. Anyway, that's what you need to do. The mighty dung beetle. We didn't see any dung beetles, and now we're starting to see the dung beetles come back. We don't pour anything. In other words, we don't put Ivomec, Sidectin. We don't use any of the chemicals. I don't use any back rubs. I don't use any ear tags. I don't use anything. I can remember as a little kid going out with my dad to the milking barn and asking him if I could milk the cow. Well, sure, son, sit down on that stool and try. I was second grade. Boy, I mean, I got a pretty good stream going. He goes, you're doing a good job, son. He walked off. I had the cow milking for the rest of my life, living at home. The moral of that story is every day I went out to milk the cows, there was always dung beetles, big ones, great big black ones. I can remember the nasty little boogers. They'd have a big old pile of crap rolled up in a ball, and one would be pushing, the other would be pulling on it. And they'd be having a hole, and they'd drop that ball of crap down the hole. I'm like, man, those are nasty boogers. They were doing a great thing for me, and I didn't even know it. We've killed them all. We've killed them all. With all these chemicals that we pour on the back of our cattle, it's killed the dung beetles. So stop doing that. It's pretty cool. This is the dirt that's being mined out of the hole. By the way, that's pig manure. That's pig manure. I never found a pig turd that was not worked over by a dung beetle, ever. They love pig poo. They absolutely love it, as long as they're grazing. Now, the pigs that we feed concentrated feed to, not so much. The dung beetles don't like that as well. But if they're grazing, there's something about that turd, they like it. There's a hole. It's about the size of a nickel. I stuck a stick down in that. It went down about 16 to 18 inches. And there was probably some other branches going off the side. So they're really infiltrating our soil. And what the dung beetles do, folks, is they live on the manure slurpee. They're sucking the juices out of that manure pad. Why is that so important? Fly larvae. The flies lay their eggs in that manure pat. And as long as that manure pat has enough juice in it, those flies hatch. And then where do they go? They're on your cows. When you get up to 200 to 300 flies per cow, that's about 2 gallons of blood a day. They're sucking out of your cow. Yep. Why do we need dung beetles? We need dung beetles to save us all the stress on our livestock. I feel bad for her. We still have flies. We're getting less. We're coming after them now with tree swallows. I'll get into that in a minute. Yes?
Did you have any, before the dung beetles showed up, did you have any management strategies to deal with the flies?
Before the dung beetles came, did I have any management strategies to deal with the flies? I played around a little bit with dragging, just dragging the manure path. That takes way too much time, too much fuel. I didn't have time to do it. They do. There's still people, well, you need to drag your pastures. I'm like, I don't have time to drag all these pastures. But the idea is to get that manure desiccated, get it dried out quick. Chickens. I would love to have somebody come to our farm. Any of you young people, talk to me, please. I'll even help finance you. I would love to have about 800 layers and keep them about 3 days behind our cows. Folks, they're going to eat some of my dung beetles, but by gosh, those manure pats are going to be gone. They're going to spread them out, and they're going to eat that larvae. Go out in your pastures, folks, this summer, and take your foot and spread a cow pad open that's 3 days old. Get ready to be horrified. There's millions of white maggots in there. Those maggots are going to be hatching out and turning into a fly that are attacking your cattle or your sheep or your pigs or whatever. So if you had chickens coming behind your cows, my gosh, that'd be awesome. We don't. We've got a young intern coming this summer. He's wanting to play around with it. I'm encouraging him, starting out on a small scale. I don't think a person ought to just jump in and do 800. Probably ought to do 50 and see how many you can keep alive. So this is what we're doing. We're taking the top third of the plant right here. We're leaving the rest of this. And folks, this little guy right here, make sure you don't ever graze that off. That tiller, that's a growing point. In the wintertime, if you take your plants down below that and you take that growing tiller off, you're going to cost yourself 3 weeks of growing season in the spring. If you remove that, it's going to cost you 3 weeks. Or your plants are going to be set back 3 weeks, which means you're going to be feeding hay another 3 weeks. Don't take those plants down too short in the wintertime. That's a perfect function of a manure pat. In other words, that cow's telling me her calf is gaining weight. She's putting on weight. She's going to cycle back. She's going to get rebred. She's getting fat for winter. And I can tell all that by looking at that manure pad. First of all, I look for my pond in the middle. I like to have the sides worked up on the sides. I like to see these crinkles, little ridges. And I want it about 1.5 inches to 2 inches tall. If you get it up here, now that cow's getting too much cellulose. She can't digest the food. In other words, the food is too mature. And she's losing weight probably. She's not gaining anything. And you don't want it real short. You want that manure pat looking like a sheet cake. She's telling you several things. One is she's probably getting too much protein. You're probably making her graze the plants down too short. Okay? If you keep your cows on the top third of that plant, that's what your manure pats will look like. If you have a cow that won't clean up, in other words, she just stays runny all summer long, and you're grazing correctly, they're only taking the top of the plant, and she still won't clean up, what is she telling you? She's telling you you need to sell her. She is. She's got a sign up here, sell me. I don't like you. I don't like your farm. I'm eating your grass. I'm not going to pay you back 1 dime. So just sell her. She's got parasites. She can't rid herself of the parasites. Her immune system's messed up. Maybe you could give her some selenium. Maybe you could get her up and pour her with Ivomec. And then the next year she'd get wormy again, pour her with Ivomec. It's just a dead-end street, guys. Once you start pouring your animals, you have placed a crutch under every single one of them. Most people worm their animals twice a year on commodity cows. So you may have a cow out there that is parasite resistant, and you get them all up in the corral, you run them through the chute, and you pour Ivomec down every single one of them. You just destroyed her natural parasite resistance. It's not the way to make money in the grazing industry. There's Eastern Gamma grass ready to graze. Healthy soil, healthy plants. That picture's a little bit off kilter. That cow's head's a little bigger than that. But it does show you want gut. Folks, you can't finish animals on pasture unless they have a big old gut. Well, you can, but it's going to take you 3 to 4 years. They're going to be on your farm a long time. And remember this, The longer an animal's on your farm before they get finished, what can happen to them? Somebody, what can happen? No, I like that. They can die. When you're in the livestock business, you're also in the dying business. Just remember that. So you want to get them finished. You want to get those things fat in about 24 to 30 months. They need to be fat and sold. You got your next crop coming up of yearlings. And that's what we're doing. We're selling grass-finished beef. Ian has done more for me than anybody in this world getting me focused. And he said, Greg, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you get for your meat. It doesn't matter what you get for your meat when you sell it. What matters is what you have in that meat. In other words, your cost of production. And if your input costs are so low, you're always going to make money. I can make money, folks, selling my meat for $1 a pound. Good money. We've been killing them these last couple of years. I mean, absolutely killing them. And they're getting $3 a pound. Well, they were for 400-pound calves. So what Ian was saying is stay focused on planting carbon on the ground. Stay focused on keeping one mob on your farm as many months out of the year as possible. One herd. You got a bigger horsepower engine. That's what you've got. If you've got 3 to 4 herds around your farm, you've got your bull herd, you've got your yearling herd, you've got your heifer herd, you've got your cow-calf herd. Maybe you've got a black herd and a red herd. You got your registered herd. I've been on them. I've been on farms where there are 7, 8 herds. Their pastures look like this carpet, and they're not in a drought. They've had adequate rain. It's because the recovery periods are too short. They've got too many groups of animals. It's killing you. It's killing you. Make sure they get slick. In other words, they've got to be able to lose their winter hair coat. A cow that doesn't slough off and get rid of that winter hair coat, she's telling you something. She's telling you she's probably going to come up open. She's not going to breed back. Her calf may even get pneumonia, might get pink eye, all these nasty diseases. She's a fly trap. We call those fly traps. A cow that has a rough hair coat will have maybe 20 to 30 times more flies on her than one that slicks off. You know why? If you lay your hand on that animal right there and just do that and pull your hand off, it's going to be oily. It's like you put your hand in an oil can. You put your hand on one of those old hairy dudes, it's dry. You pull your hand off, it's dry. There's not even any oil on it. That's a self-medicating cow there. It's telling those flies, stay off of me. If you do, I'm going to stick to your feet. You're not going to get loose. There's unfair advantage. This animal can have triplets. I don't like triplets, but she raised all 3 of those. She looks like she's got 3 more inside her. You want multiple births on animals like that. I don't want a multiple birth on a cow. But by golly, I'll take them on a sheep every day. And so the beauty of sheep is, folks, with smaller acreages, where you have a 5-acre tract or a 10-acre tract, boy, I would look at sheep first. I would look at sheep first because you can run so many more of them, and the price you get for these we use hair sheep. There's no market for the wool in our area. Now, you may live in an area of the country where there is, and if you are, that's great. There's another crop you can sell. But the hair sheep have taken over the Midwest. Nobody runs wool sheep anymore. And that's because for every sheep that has wool on it, 25% of what they eat goes to grow wool. And we have to pay $7 to get one sheared, and the wool's worth $4. I'm not a rocket scientist, but that doesn't work. That doesn't work. These are a meat sheep. That's the only reason you raise them is for meat and to sell to somebody else to start a flock. Very good market for seed stock with hair sheep right now. Don't go to the sale barn and buy them. Don't do that. You'll get somebody's junk. Why are they at that sale barn? Probably because they're not performing real good. You may be bringing in some parasites. You may be bringing in some yonis. That's a disease they get. You may get sore foot on a sheep. You bring in sorefoot on your farm, foot rot, It's bad stuff, folks. I just talked to a poor guy, Southern Missouri, on Tuesday, and he brought in some sheep, and they had foot rot. And he had to destock his whole farm and leave it idle for a year to get rid of that darn foot rot. Yep, I'll get him, then I'll get you. Yes?
Where would you suggest getting your sheep stocked?
Go to somebody that's raising them the way you want to raise them, preferably in your area. The further you move sheep or cows or pigs or goats, the bigger adaptability there is. I brought sheep out of San Angelo, Texas to Missouri in 2004. It was a wreck, absolute wreck. Lost over half of them. They went from sagebrush to Lespedeza that was that tall, that was green. They wouldn't even eat my grass. They just started dying.
What about as young animals?
The younger the class of animal, the better. That's right. A younger class animal will adapt a lot better than an older one will. And let's say you brought in a young ewe lamb, and you didn't put a ram into her until she was a full yearling, a year old. Her offspring is going to be more adapted than she is. And the reason for that is that offspring was raised from the forage off of your property. Okay? You had a question.
The density for lamb?
The density, the stocking density for our sheep, we move them every 7 days. We'll put 300 head on about 5 acres, 5 to 7 acres. Some of our paddocks are 20 acres. They're permanent. They got high tensile wire on all 4 sides of them with a gate going into the next paddock. So it depends on how big the paddocks are. We just look at the forage, make sure they don't take it down too short, and move them. See, sheep set up campsites, folks. Sheep set up campsites. They'll always go camp at night up on the highest point in a paddock. That's the way they survived over the centuries, is they can see the predators coming up at them at night to kill them. They're not going to camp down the bottom. So all your points on that paddock, that's where all your manure will be. So the longer you leave them in that paddock, the more exposure you're putting on them in parasites, because they're going to go back to that same place and camp. Goats, we like the goats because they can reach up. You can see they've just removed all the leaves as high as they can reach. Goats can graze on their back legs. They walk around on their back legs. Sheep can't do that. They can climb trees too. These are pigs with some of the rams. We put our pigs in with the rams. I loved watching that because the pigs would actually groom the rams. The rams would get burrs in them, and the pigs would go along and chew the burrs out of the ram's hair coat. They liked it, and the ram would actually stretch out, like, get all of me, don't miss any parts. Yes?
Use the same braided poly for the goats?
The goats are held in with high tensile wire, 7 strands. And some people say, well, let's stop a goat. It'll stop most goats. You know, you've heard the saying, if you can throw water through a fence, it won't hold the goat. Yeah.
And a goat will teach your cows how to crawl under a fence as well.
Yeah. Oh, she said, well, goats will teach your cows to go underneath the fence. Yes. If you have a fence crawler on a sheep, they'll go under. I had a ram. As soon as you put him into the paddock, that dang thing will go into the next paddock and jump through into the next paddock. He only been in there 5 minutes. It's the same grass. But he's like, nope, there's a fence. I'm going through it. Well, guess what he did? I went the next day. There was another ram with him. I went out the next day with my gun. I shot them both. Took care of the problem. We ate them. We ate them. If you have a fence jumper, either catch it and sell it or shoot it and eat it. Don't let it get started. They'll train every one of them to be fence jumpers. They will. And it doesn't take very long. 7 to 10 days, they'll ruin your whole flock. I'm serious. Get rid of them. Yep.
If you have just the rams there in that paddock, does that mean you also do that with your bulls? And so you do have 2 different...
The question, oh man, you're getting into a whole different deal. Oh, I was hoping this wouldn't come up. Did y'all hear the question? If I got my rams in that ram pen, where are the sheep? Yep. We'd take the rams out, and This is our management practices, all up until this year. We always took the rams out in July, and we castrate all the withers, make withers out of the little rams, and put them right back in with their mommy. That way they couldn't breed them. And we do that about July 15th. We lambed on pasture May 1st. So May, June, July, those little ram lambs are about 12 weeks old. They're sexually mature. It's unbelievable. They really get with it quick. You got to be careful. They will get those ewes bred. And so that's when we took the rams out. And we put them in November 1st. That gives you May or April 1st lambing. We moved it up to April. Anyway, I wish you hadn't asked this. I've always pushed in the envelope. I hated that. I hated going and getting those rams in the fall, trying to catch them, to get them caught, to bring them in there. I'm like, darn it, I'm not taking the rams out this year. And we're not going to castrate the ram lambs. Because you take yourself out of a market when you castrate a ram lamb. And that is, you take yourself out of the Muslim market. They will not buy an unblemished lamb. And I got to watching these rams that were selling in the local sale barn, and my gosh, they were beautiful, big, thick rams, and they were beating me by $50 a head. And I'm like, he's using the nuts. He's using the nuts to put on weight. And I'm taking them out, and I'm losing money. That doesn't make sense, so I left them all rams. I left everything together this year, and it was very fortunate. We have a lot of cedar on our farm. They started lambing about 2 weeks ago. I'm done. They're all done. Now, could that have burned me? You darn right. If we'd have got into some really cold weather, but I anticipated it. I had a cedar paddock, it was 20-some acres, full of cedars, and those ewes would go down in those cedars. A little lamb's pretty darn tough if you can get him out of the wind. I wouldn't recommend you going home doing what I did, but I'm just telling you what I did, so it didn't burn me this year. Next year I may lose a significant part of my lamb crop, but I don't have 2 herds anymore.
Did you leave the bulls in too?
Yep.
Cows?
Yep. Ask me if I left the bulls in. We have. I've been doing that for 3 years. That has not burned us. I'll get into that more in a minute. If you're going to have guard dogs, you might look at what are those guard dogs doing besides guarding your sheep? Well, they ought to be training the young set. If you can get some of these trained, they're worth a lot of money. And how do you train them? You let the older guard dogs whip the snot out of them. That's what happens. You got to get them out of there, though. When they're 5 weeks old, the mother will whelp out in the pasture with the sheep. She'll go dig a hole in the side of a bank, hollow log, somewhere. She'll have those puppies. She'll raise them up. You go out and grab the puppies from her at 5 weeks. And you make sure, I'm not a big person on shots. I don't give anything shots except for those puppies. I lost a whole litter to parvo. Give them their shot of parvo 3 times. You got to give it to them 3 times. Then you can kick them back out there. And the older dogs, they teach them to be guardian dogs. Now, some of them don't. They just like people. There's good ones and bad ones. Some of the pups grow up and they want to go see Sally across the street. In other words, they want to be a pet. They're not a guard dog. You need to sell those or give them to somebody. Not all of them work out, but that is another income source that you can have on your farm, trained guardian dogs. It's a very good income source, I will add, because they have 2 crops a year. Yes?
How long do you leave pups for their folks to?
5 weeks. I wean them at 5 weeks. And after that, I bring them back home. I get them out of there. I bring them back to the interns. And they go out and they spend some time with them each day feeding them so they get used to people. If you're going to sell dogs, you got to be able to catch them. And if you don't handle those little boogers, you got a bunch of coyotes on your hands.
So 5 weeks with the bears, that allows the bears to train.
At 5 weeks, they come back home. We give them their set of parvo shots. Every 3 weeks, you got to give them another set. So that's 9 weeks. After that, they'd be 9 and 5, be 13 weeks. And then they go back into the sheep, and then they just stay there. They're never taken out again. With the parents, yes.
How long before they're trained enough where you can sell them as a
6 months. 6 months is old enough that they can bark. They kind of know to stay with the sheep. If you want one to fend off a coyote and really be aggressive, I recommend almost a year. They're pretty much full grown at a year. Now they'll get thicker and add more weight at 2, but I tell people, a yearling guard dog, if you can keep from killing it, by the time it's 2, you've got a guard dog. Because they're still adolescents, they're going to make some mistakes. They'll go up and grab a baby lamb and pick it up and carry it off and set it down. No! And you're out there, you say, no! And don't leave the paddock without a branch. Always have a branch in your hand, a cedar branch. When you go out there to check that guard dog feed, you make darn sure those pups don't walk one step towards you when you leave the paddock. No! Stay! If they follow you to that gate, they're going to be out and they're going to get hit. They're going to get hit on the road. Never let a guard dog puppy follow you out of the pasture. And they'll tuck their tail and they'll run back, but don't just forget about shooting the breeze with your buddy. They're walking behind you. You're teaching that dog to get out. You're teaching that puppy to get out. Yes, behind you.
What do you feed them and where do you source it?
I think I have a picture of what we feed them. Oh, it's coming up. We feed them meat scraps, about 90%. Our Arbiter gives us all the free meat scraps we want, beef, pork, lamb. We freeze it in 20-pound blocks in our mineral bags. And we got our deep freeze that's full of meat scraps. And when it's down to about a third, I'll go see my butcher, and he'll lay out 3 or 4 more big tubs. And it's meat, it's fat, bone, steak, where they've trimmed the steaks out. I mean, it's good stuff. And those dogs have fangs for a reason, folks. That's to rip and chew meat and bone. They like it. The biggest cost of running your sheep is the guard dog feed. We've eliminated that pretty much. We do keep dry dog feed out there, but one bag of lot, we've got 1, 2, 3. We got 8 dogs right now. Some of those are in training. A bag of dog feed will last us almost a month for 50 pounds. If you don't have that meat out there, they'll go through 2 bags a week. Have y'all bought dog feed lately? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's $22 a bag for the good stuff. Well, the good stuff is $30. There we are going down another gravel road, just walking them from one farm to the next. This walk here is about a half a mile. Learn to read your soil. Boy, if you've got soil like that, folks, you're going to make a lot of money in the grazing business. That grass just explodes back when it's grazed. That soil, you can pour water on it, nothing will come out the bottom. It just soaks it up. It's about 6 to 7% organic matter. For every unit of organic matter you can build in your soil, it holds 4 times its weight in water. I like this one on the bottom, folks. Think about this. Every grass blade trample gives you 2 back. I got a good student here, this Justin Rhodes. I met him last night, never met him before, but I think you read the book or something, and you remembered that quote. Seriously, if you can trample it on the ground, think of it as a savings account. That's what it is. You're going to draw a little interest on that later. It's going to grow you some grass. So it's not waste when you trample it. Don't think of it as waste. It is not. There's a fresh litter bank that's just been trampled. I had to pull it back to look at it. That's all going to be feeding the soil. No livestock above the ground is going to eat that. But when I come back in 40 to 50 days, all of that's gone. It's gone. Disappeared. Bare soil has a 90% evaporation rate. There's what happens to bare soil in Missouri. That was my neighbor's. It was 104 that day. I took a surface thermometer and measured that. It was about 116 degrees. I went across the fence and stuck it in my forage. I think I was at 87. If you're an earthworm or a microbe, which one of those soils you want to live in? Not the 114. This is a guy across the road from me decided to be a crop farmer. He plowed up his beautiful grass field, put in corn, and then it rained about 5 inches. This is my field coming out. I am losing some water there. That's a broom sedge field that we've converted. It's getting better. It's still got a lot of broom sedge on it. But look at the color. That's why I wanted to put that in there. Look at the color of that water. This guy's losing his soil. It's going down to the Mississippi River. I'm keeping my soil in place. Look at the quality of the water. Go to the lowest point on your farm after a rain and look at the color of the water coming off your farm. There shouldn't be any sediment in it. It should be clear. Okay? Hopefully you don't see a lot of water leaving your farm, but you know, in a hard rain, you're going to see some. That's 5 inches of new topsoil that we've grown. Soil fact, you got 1 billion microbes per teaspoon. This is a manure pat we found on our farm. Justin, my intern, and I dug it, took a shovel, threw it in a pail, and we counted 462 earthworms in one manure pile. Folks, they live 7 years, and in their lifespan, that one worm and his ancestors produces 1.2 million worms. Okay, 1.2 million times 462. Are we talking some serious worms? You wonder why I get excited about worms? What's the pH of an earthworm casting? 7. Yep. So we're not putting any lime down, but the worms, that casting, it's neutral. I stopped burning. I used to be a burn nut until I went to Africa. I saw what they're doing to that country over there, and I just came back flabbergasted. It's going to look like the Sahara Desert in probably the next 50 years, if they keep burning like that. They're burning that whole country. The natives believe unless they burn it, that their livestock will starve to death in the spring. So they're burning everything. Ian has to put in a fire break all the way around his ranch on 1 mile increments. So when they throw a match on him, it only burns off 1 square mile. Okay. You got to remember that fire has its place maybe in some instances. And you know, the natives burned, but I think we're over burning. I mean, the sand hills, or in Kansas, the Flint Hills. You talk to some of those ranchers out there, it's turned into desert. They're burning it and burning it and burning it and burning it. Burning promotes plant spacing. It makes the plants get further apart. Grazing promotes plant density. It brings the plants closer together. I like that. I like to see lots of spiders. We got to get some taller plants. In order, you got to get the plants tall enough, we can break that stem. Remember that? We're going to break that stem over. Yes?
Now with the burning, a lot of the plants, especially like in our area, evolve with, you know, with seasonal, not necessarily seasonal, but every so
Yep.
often burning. So like how do you...
It's
do
a
you have-
tool. Burning is a tool.
any idea?
Warm season grasses, I've got them. I've got one field that's all gamma grass. I used to burn it every year. When I stopped burning it, that's when I started getting the diversity. I brought the cattle in. I still had that big old thatch on there, but I used the cattle. I fed the soil, trampled it. When you throw a match to it, poof, all that carbon's gone. It's gone. And any soil life you had in that field, you just killed it. Some of those fires get darn hot.
So before humans started interacting more with it, you know, a lot of times, you know, every say 3 to 5 years, you might have a wildfire
Yep.
through an area. So was that still detrimental to that area then, or how do you?
I just think fire needs to be used sparingly. Okay. You know, if you look at Yellowstone Park, I was there in the 80s. And, I mean, I looked through there and I'm like, oh, my God, this place is a tinderbox just ready to go up. And it did. It had never been burned for like 30-some years. But when it did, it scorched it. It looked like a moonscape in there. Ian was there like 7 years after the big burn. There were still areas there wasn't anything growing on. I mean, it scorched it. So just be careful. I think you can do some pretty incredible things with density in the same tool as you can with fire. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying be careful with it. Yep. She's saying it'll actually fire the clay when it gets hot enough. That's right. Yeah, you can't grow anything then. I have a bad problem in our neighborhood. Somebody has got it spread around the local Amish community to burn. They're burning that whole community out there now. All the roadsides. I even saw one Amish burning his cornfield off, the stalks. And I'm like, what in the world? Somebody's convinced them that it gets rid of the ticks, it gets rid of all the bugs, and you got all this clean, pretty grass in the spring. But guess what's happening on those road banks? They're getting bare spots. The plant spacing is getting further apart. Pretty soon the banks are going to be sloughing off. Just be careful.